I am Amara Kingsley, and I am 36 years old. For most of my adult life, my name only existed in relation to another man. I was someone's wife, someone's support system, someone's shadow. People who met me in those years would have described me as quiet, dependable, and patient. What they didn't know was that patience was never weakness for me. It was observation. It was memory. And it was preparation. Before I continue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this reach people who are silently enduring betrayal, sacrifice, and disappointment, and your support helps these stories travel to the people who need them the most. 3 months ago, my marriage officially ended. 15 years of shared history, shared meals, shared struggles, and shared dreams were reduced to signatures on paper. But the ending people saw was not where my story truly began. It was simply the moment when silence finally spoke. To understand how I reached that courtroom with calm certainty instead of desperation, you have to know who I was long before the world pitted me. I grew up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Brookhaven City, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's children and success was measured by stability, not luxury. My parents worked hard but lived simply. My grandmother, Evelyn Moore, was the strongest woman I knew. She believed in love, but she believed more in independence. Marriage should add to you, she used to say, not erase you. At the time, I thought her words were old-fashioned. I would later realize they were prophetic. I met Darius Kingsley when I was 18. I had just finished secondary school and started working as a junior administrative clerk at a small legal office downtown. Darius was already a few years older, confident, charming, and endlessly ambitious. He spoke about real estate, expansion, and success as if they were inevitable outcomes rather than risks. When he talked about the future, people leaned in. When I talked, I listened. That difference would shape everything that followed. Darius made me feel chosen. He told me I was special, different, smarter than I realized. He said he admired my discipline and my quiet strength. At 18, those words felt like love. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. I ignored my mother's concern and my grandmother's long silence. Love, I believed, required faith. We married when I was 19. By 21, I was pregnant with our son, Eli. Motherhood grounded me in a way nothing else ever had. My world became schedules, responsibility, and sacrifice. I learned how to stretch money, how to plan meals, how to keep a household running even when exhaustion threatened to break me. While Darius chased opportunity, I built consistency. I continued working at the law firm, rising slowly but steadily. I learned how documents worked, how contracts were structured, how numbers told stories people tried to hide. I didn't know then that those skills would one day save me. I only knew that I liked being capable. My grandmother noticed my discipline. Whenever she visited, she would slip a little money into my purse or envelope. "Save it," she whispered. "A woman should never stand on one leg alone." I listened. Quietly, carefully, I saved. It wasn't much, but it was mine. When Darius's business began to show signs of success, everything changed. His confidence grew louder. His patience grew thinner. One evening, he came home glowing with pride and told me he needed me to quit my job and work for him full-time. "I trust you more than anyone," he said. "You're basically running this place already." It sounded like partnership. It sounded like respect. I believed him. I left my job. From that day forward, I became the invisible engine behind his success. I managed accounts, coordinated meetings, tracked expenses, reviewed contracts, and handled crisis after crisis. I worked without pay because I believed in the vision. I believed in us. The company grew. The lifestyle improved. Bigger house. Better cars. Expensive dinners. Public admiration. But with every milestone, something essential faded. Gratitude disappeared first. Then kindness. Then respect. "You don't understand business," Darius would snap when I asked questions. "You're too emotional. You should be grateful." I swallowed my hurt and told myself this was what sacrifice looked like. Successful men were under pressure, weren't they? I convinced myself that loyalty meant endurance. Then came the night everything shifted. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. Eli was asleep. The house was still. Darius sat across from me at the kitchen table, his face unreadable. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hesitate. "I want a divorce," he said. "I'll take the company, the house, the cars. You can keep our son." Just like that. 15 years reduced to logistics. No apology. No explanation. Just entitlement. What I didn't know then, but would soon confirm, was that the decision had been made long before that night. Darius already had a lawyer. He already had a new woman from his office. His mother, Lorraine Kingsley, had already chosen sides. Within weeks, I was pushed into the guest room. My credit card stopped working. My clothes were removed from the master bedroom and packed into trash bags. Lorraine supervised it all. "You women always think sacrifice entitles you to ownership," she said coldly. "My son built this." People pitied me. Friends whispered. Family offered sympathy. Everyone thought I had been discarded without warning. They were wrong. 3 years earlier, long before the divorce, I had discovered something Darius never intended me to find. It was late one night. Darius claimed he was meeting investors. I was reviewing company accounts, something I had done countless times. That night, the numbers felt wrong. Transfers to unfamiliar accounts. Loans that didn't align with our records. I followed the trail carefully, my heart pounding. The house had 4 separate mortgages. The cars were leased under company credit. The business was operating on borrowed money. Total debt, 3.4 billion Nigerian nairas. The empire was an illusion. I sat alone in the kitchen surrounded by documents, realizing our entire life was built on financial deception. Panic tried to rise, but I forced it down. Instead of confronting him, I remembered my grandmother's voice. "Protect yourself." I moved my savings, my inheritance, my retirement funds. Everything went into a trust under Eli's name. I documented every loan, every account, every lie. Copies stored in multiple locations. Digital, physical, secure. I didn't plan revenge. I planned survival. For 3 years, I waited. I smiled at social gatherings. Balanced accounts. Played the role everyone expected. I let Darius believe he was brilliant. Let him believe I was insignificant. Men like him always ask for everything. They never check the cost. When he finally demanded the house, the business, the cars, I almost smiled. He wasn't claiming wealth. He was claiming collapse. And I was ready. The moment Darius asked for everything, I understood exactly how the story would end. Men like him never want compromise. They want conquest. They want to walk away believing they won. And the most dangerous thing you can give a man like that is exactly what he demands. I didn't argue when he laid out his terms. I didn't raise my voice or remind him of the years I had sacrificed. I didn't mention the nights I stayed awake balancing accounts while he slept peacefully beside me. I nodded slowly, like a woman defeated. "If that's what you want," I said quietly, eyes lowered. "I just want peace." That sentence became my disguise. Darius mistook silence for surrender. He leaned back in his chair, visibly relieved. In his mind, the hardest part was over. He had expected tears. Resistance. Negotiation. When none came, his confidence expanded. Within days, his lawyer contacted me. The paperwork was aggressive, unapologetic, and written with the assumption that I would not fight. I signed nothing at first. I simply read. Every page. Every clause. Every hidden implication. Then I called Nadine Brooks. Nadine was a seasoned family and financial attorney with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her office sat quietly on the 7th floor of a building most people walked past without noticing. She listened without interrupting as I placed 3 thick binders on her desk. "These," I said, "are everything my husband doesn't want anyone to see." She opened the first binder. Then the second. By the third, she leaned back in her chair slowly. "You've known about this for years," she said. "Yes," I replied. "And you stayed." I waited. Nadine studied me carefully. "Why now?" "Because he finally asked for everything." For the first time, she smiled. What followed wasn't a legal battle. It was choreography. Nadine explained the strategy simply. We would not challenge ownership. We would not request valuation audits. We would not demand spousal support. We would let Darius take full control of all assets and all liabilities without resistance. "He'll think you're broken," Nadine said. "Let him." From that day on, I became exactly who everyone expected me to be. At mediation meetings, I spoke softly. My hands trembled just enough to look real. I wiped away tears that never reached my heart. "I don't want to fight," I told the mediator. "I just want to move on." Darius sat across from me, smug and relaxed. He told his friends I was emotional, unstable, incapable of handling business matters. His mother repeated it with pride. "She was always weak," Lorraine said. My son carried her. They never questioned why a weak woman had managed his finances for over a decade. Darius's new girlfriend, Celine, entered the picture publicly soon after. She was 28, Stylish, loud in her confidence, and thrilled by the attention that came with dating a man she believed was wealthy. She posted pictures online of expensive dinners, luxury handbags, and captions about new beginnings and knowing your worth. She moved into my old home before the divorce was even finalized. She repainted the walls, replaced the furniture, and turned the space I once maintained into a showroom of borrowed luxury. Watching her parade through that house felt surreal. Every item she touched was already collateral. Darius began rushing the process. He wanted the divorce finalized quickly, so he could move forward publicly. His lawyer, Martin Hale, warned him repeatedly. "We should review the liabilities again," Martin said during one meeting. "At least conduct a partial audit." Darius waved him off. "She handled the books," he said dismissively. "She didn't know what she was doing." "I do." That arrogance would destroy him. Martin eventually drafted a waiver stating that Darius declined independent financial review and accepted all disclosed assets and debts as is. He signed it without reading, too busy texting Celine about their weekend getaway. Every signature tightened the noose. Throughout it all, I played my part flawlessly. I never contradicted him. I never asked for more. When the proposed settlement listed my share as 25 million Nigerian nairas, I nodded in agreement. "That's enough," I said softly. Nadine raised an eyebrow when she saw the figure. "Are you sure?" she asked privately. "Yes," I replied. "He deserves everything else." By the time the final hearing date was set, the narrative had already been written, just not the one Darius believed. The courtroom was cold and sterile, filled with the quiet hum of inevitability. Darius arrived in a tailored suit, confidence radiating from every step. A new watch glinted on his wrist, paid for by a business credit line he barely understood. Celine wasn't allowed inside, but she waited outside proudly, posting updates online. I wore a simple navy dress. No jewelry. No performance. Calm. The judge reviewed the file briefly. "Both parties are in agreement?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Martin replied. "My client is receiving all marital assets. Mrs. Kingsley receives a cash settlement." The judge looked at me. "Do you understand what you're giving up?" "Yes," I said. "And you're doing so willingly?" "Yes." He nodded and proceeded. Paperwork passed across the table. Darius signed confidently, barely skimming the pages. When he finished, he leaned back, victorious. Then Martin froze. "Darius," he whispered urgently. "We need to talk." Darius frowned. "What is it now?" "You're assuming full liability for." "What liability?" Darius snapped. Martin turned pale. "The mortgages. The loans. The credit facilities. All of it." Darius grabbed the papers and scanned the figures. The color drained from his face. Total debt, 3.4 billion Nigerian nairas. Asset value, 2.6 billion Nigerian nairas. He hadn't won a fortune. He'd inherited a sinking ship. "This isn't right," he muttered. "She hid this." The judge's voice cut through the room. "Mr. Kingsley, are you claiming you were unaware of your own finances?" Martin handed over the signed waiver. "For the record, Your Honor, I advised my client to conduct an audit." He declined. The judge examined it briefly. "Then the agreement stands." Darius turned to me, eyes wide. "You knew." I met his gaze calmly. "I managed your accounts for 11 years, I said quietly. "Of course I knew." The gavel struck. Divorce finalized. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked past him. "You asked for everything," I whispered. "Now you have it." Outside, sunlight greeted me like freedom. Behind me, Darius's voice echoed in panic, shouting at his lawyer. "I told you," Martin replied evenly. "You didn't listen." I never looked back. Within weeks, the illusion collapsed. Celine disappeared without explanation. Lorraine stopped answering calls. Banks refused refinancing. Suppliers froze accounts. Lawsuits followed. Darius's empire crumbled under its own weight. And I did nothing. Because the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's distance. The collapse didn't come loudly at first. It came in whispers, in delayed payments, in unanswered calls, in meetings that ended early and promises that quietly expired. Darius still walked with confidence for a while, still wore the suit, still posted carefully angled photos online. But beneath the surface, the weight was crushing him. Banks started calling, then writing, then threatening. The house, his house now, was the first to turn against him. The 4 mortgages he had proudly inherited refused to coexist peacefully. Interest rates adjusted. Grace periods expired. The property value, inflated by his own exaggerations, couldn't withstand reality. When he tried to refinance, lenders laughed politely and declined firmly. The business followed. Suppliers who once treated him like royalty now demanded payment up front. Contractors halted work mid-project. Employees whispered in hallways, then updated their resumes. The credit line that funded his lifestyle froze without warning, leaving expenses stranded in limbo. Darius blamed everyone. His lawyer, the economy, former partners, anyone but himself. Celine vanished quietly, taking her designer bags and curated lifestyle with her. One day her social media accounts went dark. The next, her name was never mentioned again. The house felt too large without her laughter, too quiet without the illusion she had helped him maintain. Lorraine, once so proud, stopped hosting her weekly gatherings. Church friends noticed her silence. Her son's name no longer carried admiration, only curiosity. "What happened to Darius?" they asked. She had no answer. I heard these things secondhand, through mutual acquaintances, through whispers that reached me only because people assumed I would feel satisfaction. They were wrong. What I felt was clarity. I had already mourned that marriage long before it ended. The courtroom wasn't closure, it was confirmation. The real healing began afterward, in a space that was finally mine. My apartment was small but intentional. I painted the kitchen walls sage green, the same color I had once chosen for a home that was never truly safe. This time, the color felt different. It felt earned. Eli adjusted quickly. Children sense peace before adults do. He slept better. He laughed more. The tension that once filled our evenings dissolved into something lighter. One night, as I cooked dinner, he looked up from his homework and asked, "Mom, is Dad really rich like he says?" I smiled softly. "What do you think?" He thought for a moment. "I think he's pretending." I nodded. "You're right." He didn't know it yet, but his future was secure. The trust fund I had built quietly over years of discipline and restraint was untouched, growing patiently. It wasn't about wealth. It was about choice. 2 months after the divorce, the final blow landed. Darius filed for bankruptcy. The news spread quickly, quietly satisfying those who had watched his arrogance with discomfort. The luxury car was sold. The watch disappeared. The house went into foreclosure proceedings. Lorraine called once, her voice thin and uncertain. "Tell your mother I didn't know," she said to Eli. "Tell her I'm sorry." Eli listened politely, then said, "My mom is busy rebuilding her life. She doesn't have time." I didn't tell him what to say. He already knew. A few weeks later, Darius showed up at my door. I recognized him immediately, but he looked like a man I'd never met. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow, his posture bent under the weight of consequences. "Amara," he said quietly. I didn't invite him in. "I didn't know it was this bad," he continued. "I made mistakes. I crossed my arms. You made choices." He swallowed. "Can we talk? Maybe we can fix something." I shook my head gently. "You asked for everything except our son. You got exactly what you wanted." For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. I closed the door. That was the moment I knew the storm had passed. Life didn't become perfect overnight. Healing never works that way. But it became honest. I used part of my settlement to furnish the apartment simply. Nothing extravagant. Just warm. Intentional. I enrolled in interior design classes at the community college, something I had dreamed of quietly for years but never pursued. On the first day, I sat in the back, nervous and excited. The instructor smiled and said, "It's never too late to start." She was right. My first client came unexpectedly, a recently divorced woman named Maribel who stood in her empty apartment and asked, "How do I begin again?" "One room at a time," I told her. "One choice at a time." When she asked me to choose a paint color, I smiled. "Sage green," I said. "It's the color of peace." Word spread slowly, then steadily. Friends referred friends. People trusted me not just to decorate their spaces, but to understand what it meant to rebuild a home from fragments. I wasn't rich, but I was free. One evening, as I sat at my small desk beneath my grandmother's photograph, I whispered, "You were right." Her wisdom had saved me. Independence wasn't rejection of love. It was insurance against betrayal. On a quiet Sunday morning, I brewed coffee and watched sunlight pour through the window, illuminating the space I had created. No lies. No performance. No fear. I thought about my past without bitterness. Because every betrayal had led me here, to peace, to purpose, to myself. I whispered the truth I had learned the hardest way possible. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. And this time, the silence had won. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach people who need to hear that patience can be power, silence can be strength, and starting over can be the greatest victory of all.